Hi everybody, it's Nick. As ever, somewhat unprepared, raw, unfiltered, and in the moment. Enjoying my new working space actually. So I've been very blessed. I've wanted a woodland lodge for a very long time, and we have just finished it, and I've just moved in. So yeah, but that's not what this is about. But anyway, yes, really enjoying it. Look, getting myself all set up. The point I wanted to talk about today is judgment, and in a funny way, I think judgment's easier to deal with when you know it's not coming from a very nice place, when you perhaps don't know the person that well that it's coming from, or that you do, and you know there just isn't a sync between you, there just isn't a meeting of minds. I think actually passive judgment or well-intentioned judgment actually could be a lot more difficult to deal with. And I have had a couple of instances of late where that has happened. And the interesting thing is that we all look at everybody else's life. We're all kind of in this comparison mode. As much as we say we're not, even if it's subconscious, we are. I'm as bad as anybody else. You know, I follow some people on Instagram, and it's just pure escapism because, you know, they're posting these beautiful aspects of their life in their beautiful country homes and telling really lovely stories and trying to spread the word of simple, joyous living and beautiful things and, you know, sustainable life and all the rest of it. But that doesn't mean that those people that I'm looking at and indulging myself. And make no mistake, I'm no fool. I do understand what I'm doing. I'm distracting myself from perhaps some uncomfortable things that I'm not ready to face, or maybe I just need a bit of escapism, who knows. But I'm not under any illusions. You know, they all have their own battles, and everybody's journey and battles are different, and it's relative to them. And just because I might perceive them to be, you know, better or worse than mine doesn't mean they are. It's just my perspective on it. And I know that I always remind myself how hugely blessed I am to be loved and to have healthy children and a close and loving family, and to have a really very nice life. It's very much the good life. You know, my husband and I have very much built the dream that we had. And so it is very easy, I think, for people to look upon that, and therefore to say perhaps I shouldn't have anything to feel down about or to get anxious about, etc., etc. But that's not how life works, because no matter where we are at a point in time, you know, we're all a bit the walking wounded, because that's part of the human experience. So where I am now, at 51 years old, is a result of a whole journey, you know, a 51-year journey. And certainly the start of that journey, if I'm honest, wasn't the easiest. And there was some really significant milestones for me earlier, particularly in my teens and my 20s, which were, you know, at the time were really quite bruising and traumatic. Now, for whatever reason, you know, maybe it was me, maybe I got lucky, maybe it was a combination, who knows, I was able to move on from them and grow from them. But, you know, they leave wounds and they leave scars with us. And that can manifest itself later on in life. And certainly with the menopause, I have found, anxiety and kind of unhealed, unresolved grief, and things that were traumatic to me. Doesn't matter about if they were traumatic to other people, they were traumatic to me at the time, you know, do rear their head. And things trigger us. So when I had, you know, my operation the other month to reconstruct my Achilles tendon, that could be perceived by many as a really straightforward thing. It was just a few weeks and, you know, no big deal. But there were certain things about that really triggered some stuff in me around being of value and my self-esteem. And I think a lot of my self-esteem and value has been built around my physicality and being able to do and being able to, be physically present and strong, very productive, very go, go, go. And that was actually something that hit me really hard about the menopause, actually, to go from this hugely energetic person, jumping out of bed, literally jumping out of bed at 5:30 in the morning was, normal for me for years, 20, 30 years, doing lots of exercise, keeping extremely fit, raising 3 children, looking after the home, doing all kinds of things, writing and reading and studying and doing odd consulting engagements here. I mean, the list goes on. I think at one point I ran a vintage boutique because I felt like doing that. And then I was looking at starting a lifestyle business. I mean, I've always been very good at filling my time and being very self-motivated. Definitely something, actually. I look at my mother and she's very good at that. She's very, very good at that, keeping herself active, keeping herself socialised, keeping herself really engaged in life. And I think that's really important. And my dad was really, really motivated around his physicality and keeping fit and sport and the whole community around that. So I think they were really good role models for me. So when the menopause came along, and actually all I wanted to do was stay in bed, and I went from really somebody I was glamorous every day, my hair and makeup was done every single day, to now I'm just wandering around in my scruffs, and I've had a really, really lazy day, and I'm really blessed that I'm able to have that lazy day. And it's not that I don't understand I'm blessed. I absolutely do. And equally, it's not that I'm unaware of I say weaknesses, whatever the word is you want to use. I am a princess. I do I do love nice things. I do love doing nice things. I do love, I'm the youngest of 4. I was the baby. I love being loved, and I love loving, and I love experiencing adventures and beautiful things in life and being surrounded by beauty. But equally, I'm pretty flexible. I'm really happy to be able to have money and splurge on the finer things. But because I didn't grow up with money, I didn't grow up in that world, I can roll either way. There have been times, years ago when we closed our business down, when things were really dire for 2 or 3 years. And it wasn't something I would have chosen for us, but I was flexible. It was like, well, that's just the way it is. We can't afford nice things like, having a wine budget and doing these extras. It was absolutely, what are the bare minimum things that we need to pay to keep the show on the road until we get back on our feet. So I think there is something actually really beneficial from growing up in a more harsher reality, because I just think you're less phased in a lot of ways. You can rock and roll with it. But the whole point to this is to say that that doesn't mean whoever's life you're looking at, whoever, whether it be famous people or, successful people or rich people or people who are struggling, people who have different challenges with their health, whether it be mental or physical, it doesn't matter. The common denominator is that we are all human beings. And just because their challenge isn't the same as yours or is outside your realm of understanding, doesn't mean any of us have the right to invalidate how people feel. And that is the crux of psychological safety. That is at the heart of what psychological safety is. It is allowing a person to completely and utterly show up. So some of the well-intentioned and perhaps passive judgment I've bumped into of late did make me question whether, oh God, am I just some spoiled, narcissistic, overindulged person that just needs to get a grip on myself? And maybe at times I am, and maybe I'm not. But what I do know is whenever I do a vlog or whenever I write something, it is absolutely written with genuine honesty and with a genuine intent to help others. So I didn't go and delete a load of stuff and think, oh gosh, it's making people think not very nice things about me. Because the minute we start to only do things based on what other people think about us, we put ourselves in prison, we put ourselves in a cage. We absolutely shut down our creativity. And just as when I was doing vlogs about the few days after my operation, which might seem pity to a lot of people, particularly people who have had far bigger operations and far more profound stuff, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't scared, and that doesn't mean that I didn't struggle. And I think that there's lots of people out there that maybe have had, what we might perceive as these smaller procedures and so forth, that might be afraid to say, actually, I was scared and it did make me feel a bit shit and it did make me feel down. And actually, it's really important to say it. And it's really important to have the psychologically safe environment to be able to say it, because it's only when we can verbalise and think these things through that we let them go and we move on. That's how it works. That's how our minds work. It's the being ashamed of feeling like that and keeping it inside that does so much bloody damage. So it is really, really interesting that I've observed of late, rather than, because none of this stuff's coming from a place of bad intent. It's coming from, everybody lives in their own reality and they see the world from their own perspective, and that's absolutely fine. And what they think or say, what anybody else thinks, it may absolutely be true for them, but that doesn't mean I have to take it on as my truth. So I think the really big question we need to ask ourselves is when we come across that kind of passive judgment or uncomfortable feeling we get when somebody might say something like, oh, well, look on the bright side. Oh, it could be worse. Oh, but, just look how lucky you are. Just look, and kind of shuts you down and doesn't allow you to have that space. So it's a really important thing to question and say, is it genuine what I was feeling? Okay, so it doesn't matter whether somebody else thinks it is or not. What matters is what you think. And if it is, then give yourself that permission to feel it and then let it go. Then just let it go. Because it's by not allowing ourselves, not giving ourselves that permission, and we don't as yet live in a wholly psychological safe society, and we may never do, but that doesn't mean that we can't create our own bit of psychological safety. So I'm not going to delete stuff that I've done previously, even if I have been a bit of a self-indulged princess about stuff, because it was true in the moment. And actually just the very act of doing it helped me move on. And even if there's just one person who might have felt a bit like me, who hears that me too, and it helps them to move on, then job done. It's worth it, because it was shared as ever with a genuine intent to use the whole me too, give somebody permission to actually validate their feelings, own their feelings, have a look at them, explore them, let them go, be able to grow and move on from those feelings rather than let them fester and hide them in shame. So I hope, as ever, that's been of help. And I wanted to share that because it's been on my mind. And if something's on my mind, I think it's important to share in the moment, which I have, as you can tell, because I have actually washed and brushed my hair today, but I've been out in the garden and this is the result. So lots of fresh air, which was great. Okay, lots of love. Bye.